All right, today's speaker, George Nassos, is principal of George P. Nassos Associates, a consulting company focusing on environmental sustainability and renewable energy. For 14 years, he was industry associate professor and director of the MS program in environmental management and sustainability at Illinois Institute of Technology's Graduate Business School until he retired in 2011 for the second time. He taught the capstone course, which resulted in writing the textbook Practical Sustainability Strategies and How to Gain a Competitive Advantage, published by John Wiley & Son. 5 years ago, he was recruited by DePaul University to be director of the MS in Sustainable Management program in the, is it Dry House? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Driehaus, thank you, College of Business. Because of the pandemic, he was forced to retire for a third time. However, he did publish the second edition of his textbook in 2020. He also contributed to a new book, Biofutures, published in 2021. He is currently a co-founder and dean of environmental and sustainability management at the Arison Institute of Chicago, a new private business college. So if you would please welcome George Nassos.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I hope you enjoy the presentation. Since we're talking about the environment, I'm going to go to the real basic. I'm going to tell you about the origin of the environment. Our planet is, historians tell me that's 4.5 billion years old. A billion is a huge number, and you need to reduce it to something that's more understandable. And as an example, if you're 21 years old and you have a very wealthy relative and gives you $1 billion as a gift, and you just put it away, you can spend $60,000 every day the rest of your life until you're 65 to retire, and you'll still have 36 million left over. So it gives you an idea what $1 billion is. So if we're talking about the Earth being 4.5 billion years old, I'm going to reduce it to something that's more understandable, and that's the 6 days. 6 days of creation. So here's an evolutionary analogy. On Monday, the Earth is created. Tuesday at 8 o'clock, we have life. Millions of species appear and disappear. By Thursday morning, we have photosynthesis. It goes in high gear. By Saturday, oxygen, chlorophyll. And what happens with vegetation under pressure, it becomes coal. By Saturday at 4 p.m., we have giant reptiles and amphibians come on from shore. Saturday at 10 o'clock, we have primates. At 11:59 and 54. So out of 6 days, the last 6 seconds, we have Homo sapiens, Adam and Eve. A quarter of a second before midnight, Jesus Christ appears. A 40th of a second, you have the Industrial Revolution. And an 80th of a second, the discovery of oil, and accelerates the carbon blowout. So it gives you an idea of how everything has happened very, very recently on this planet. And so what has happened since then? And these numbers probably have changed since the last time I did some research, but 70% of our fisheries are at biological limit. Forest cover is gone. 50% of our wetlands are lost. Grasslands are lost. Our coral reefs are dead. And 40% of a species are endangered. And 40% of the world is experiencing water shortage. I'd say it's probably more like 50 or 60% today. So the question is, how much longer are we going to go? This was a week. Do we have another week? How long are we going to last? Just think, a 40th of a second That's 5 generations. Are we going to overshoot and collapse? And what do I mean by that? Well, here's a metaphor. During World War II, the military was concerned about feeding all the military in the Pacific. And so they did an experiment. They found St. Matthew's Island in the Bering Strait. And this is an island that had no animals, only vegetation. And they said, what if we put some animals there, start growing some food? And they said that the estimated carrying capacity is 1,600 to 2,300 reindeer. So in 1944, they put 29 reindeer on the island. In 1957, it got up to 1,350. And then in 63, it was 6,000. But they said, wait a minute. We estimated it could only hold maybe 2,000. So what do you think happened in 1966? 42. And basically the island collapsed. It was from starvation and disease. And it never grew from that 42. Why? Because they're all females. But this is a graph that shows you what happened at St. Matthew's Island. And what's our problem? Well, we have a lot of environmental issues. I reduce it down to 4 major issues. One is the water shortage. And just to give you an idea how little water we have, this is the distribution of the Earth's water. You can see 97% is salt water, only 3% is fresh water. And of that 3%, you can see 68% is on ice caps and glaciers, which is reducing. But basically, only 0.3% is available fresh water. And you can see on the right how much of that is lakes and swamps. If you do all these percentages, 3% times 0.03, 3% times 0.3, it comes out to 0.01%. And of that, 60% is used for agriculture, 30% for industry, and only 10% for human consumption. So of all the water on the earth, only 0.001% is available for human consumption. Climate change, really it's global warming, but it sounds too drastic, global warming, so they changed the name to climate change. And in 1988, James Hansen testified before Congress and said, we have a problem here. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was formed in '92. 5 years later, they met again in Kyoto, Japan, and they set targets of what we need to do. This is over 200 countries. And they said by 2050, we have to reduce carbon emissions by 60 to 80%. But we can't wait 50 years and see how we're doing. So let's establish a smaller target, 5%. And 15 years. So we have 15 years just to reduce emissions by 5%. So how do you think we did? We went up 58%. So James Hansen said that the carbon dioxide level has historically for centuries was around 280 parts per million. But because of the Industrial Revolution, it started to increase. And he said, if we go over 350, we're in trouble. So what happened in 2013, we reached 400. And last year we're up to 421. So that's really our big problem with climate change. Consumption of our natural resources. What do we mean by that? That's all the biological natural resources that are generated every year on this planet. And it's a measure of productive land and water to generate what we need for food, for clothing, energy, and so on. And there's an organization called, used to be called the Redefining Progress. It's now the Global Footprint Network. And this organization measures for every country how much productive land each country has for these growing these natural resources. And they measure it as a whole, but also on a per capita basis. And they also measure the consumption of every country. And here, this graph or table gives you an idea of the ecological footprint for 2018. At the top is Qatar. They consume 35 acres per person annually. That's how much they need to supply their population. Luxembourg's not much better. We're not much better either. 20 acres per person is what we consume on this earth. And you can go down. The important ones is the red one world. On the average for the entire global population, 6.85 acres per person is what we're consuming. But the problem is, look at the green one, biocapacity. It's 3.9. That's all. So we're consuming almost twice what we're generating. There's another metric called, which is the one that's used mostly now, and that's Earth Overshoot Day. Earth Overshoot Day is the day in the year when we will have consumed all the natural resources that are going to be generated in that calendar year. And in 2022, that date was July 28th. So by the end of July, we have consumed all the natural resources that we're going to generate in 2022. So we're up using 1.8, 1.9 Earths. So what do we need to do? Well, in 1987, there was a great meeting chaired by Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was at the time Prime Minister of Norway. And they were looking to see what do we need to do to make sure the poorer countries, the ones at the bottom here, can still have resources in order for their citizens. And that was the beginning of the word sustainability. It's actually sustainable development, shortened down to sustainability. Sorry, I was ahead of my time there. The fourth major issue is the world population, which is contributing to the other three. And this is what's happening with the population. At the time of Christ, there were about 150 million people on this earth. 1,800 years later, we hit 1 billion. 60, 70 years later, we hit 2 billion, and you can see what's happening. You and I have been on this earth an infinitesimal small period of time, given since humans have been on this earth. Yet, just in my lifetime, we have added over 5.5 billion people, and we're growing at 10 million people every 6 to 7 weeks. And this is one of the problems. And so what's the answer? Sustainable development. And that's the practice of sustainable development assures that the natural resources and energy we use to provide today's products and services will not deny future generations the resources necessary to meet their needs while building and preserving communities that are economically, socially, environmentally healthy. And this was led to the origin of the triple bottom line. For sustainability, you need environmental integrity, social equity, and economic viability. And this was created by John Elkington in 1994. He says it's this triangle. It's also, you may have heard it as planet, people, profit. I have what I call a more realistic bottom line, that we have the origin, the environment. The earth is the environment. Within the environment, we have society, people. And then within all that is we have economics. So what has happened to sustainability over the last 35 years? As I mentioned, the Brundtland Commission in 1987, triple bottom line in 1994. And in 2005, it came up with another term called environmental social governance, ESG. And if you look at any of the financial pages, you're going to see ESG all the time. And what is that? Well, it's basically not much different than the triple bottom line. You have the environment that you have to worry about. You have to take care of the people. And governance refers to the people in your organization, the board of directors, the CEO, the managers. What are they doing to make sure we meet the environmental and social needs? And if you have the proper governance, money will come. And it turns out that companies that practiced ESG were found to be more profitable. And there are mutual funds that only invest in ESG companies. And so what's happened is because they're more profitable, more companies are claiming to be ESG. Why? So that when investors see that they're practicing ESG, maybe the value of their stock goes up. But it's an example of what's called greenwashing. They're telling people we're really green, but they're not. So if you see a company that claims to be ESG, be careful. You got to do some research to make sure that they're doing it. So what are some strategies that companies can do to be more sustainable? One is called servicizing. This is a word that you're not going to find in the dictionary, but basically it means if you have a product that provides some kind of a function, instead of selling the product, sell the function. And what happens, you keep control of the product and you can make it better and make it more efficient. What are some examples? Incandescent light bulbs. We don't have them anymore, but just to give you an idea to understand, what happens when your incandescent light bulb burnt out? What do? You unplug it and you throw it away. But what was wrong with it? There was a tiny metal filament inside that broke. But you throw away the filament, the glass, the ceramic, the metal, and then you put another one in there. What if a company like Sylvania that makes light bulbs came up with a better light bulb where you can unscrew the bulb, take out that broken filament, and put in a new one, and then screw it and put it back in? The only waste is that little tiny filament. But even that isn't waste because you can collect all these, melt them, and make new ones. So in theory, once you have a light bulb in every socket in the country, you would never have to produce another one. You just keep using them over and over. You just need people, the service. So that's an example. Interface Carpet Company, the largest commercial carpeting company in the country, and they came up with an idea of not selling carpeting, but selling the aesthetics. In other words, the North Shore Senior Center would rent the carpeting. And if they saw a tile a tile coming down the aisles that is worn more, they would just change that tile. Why change the ones in the corner that nobody steps on? Nothing happens to it. So, and what do they do with the old tile? They take it back, recycle it, and use it over again. Electrolux with washing machines. This company decided what they would do is they'd bring a washing machine to your house and they would charge you by how many times you use it, loads. This made sure that you had full loads. And after so many loads, they come, they remove it, give you another one, they take it, upgrade it, and give it to somebody else. So they didn't sell them, they leased them to you. Another one is DuPont and Ford. This is assembly plant in England where DuPont sold paint to Ford, and DuPont's profit center was to sell as much paint as possible. Ford went to Mr. DuPont and said, I don't want you to sell me paint anymore. I want you to sell me a painted car. So now DuPont was responsible for painting the car. So what do? They changed the formulation to meet the needs of Ford, but to use less paint. The spray guns were more efficient, so there'd be less overspray, less waste. And so they used considerably less paint, and DuPont and Ford shared in that savings. So that's just servicizing. This kind of led to the sharing economy. And the sharing economy is basically underutilized assets. What are some underutilized assets? Remember DVDs? We used to buy them, and then you show a movie, you watch it 2-3 times, and then what do you do with your DVD? It sits in your house. But then we had a company like Blockbuster where you would rent them, and then you'd rent them from Netflix by mail. And now DVDs are gone, everything is streaming. So a DVD was an underutilized asset. Automobiles, if you stop to think, you use your automobile maybe 3% of the time that's available for you, yet you pay 100% of the depreciation, the insurance, the maintenance, everything, but it's hardly used. And so this was the origin of companies like iGo and Zipcar, where if you need a car, you can rent it, use it for a couple hours, then somebody else uses it. Bicycle, the same thing. Began Divvy and Spinster, where you can rent bicycles. Bedrooms, people that have condos that they use a few weeks a year, maybe a month or so, the rest of the time it might be empty. You can rent it out through Airbnb or VRBO. So these are examples of underutilized assets. That was the beginning of the sharing economy. And there's one underutilized asset that I think about a lot, but I haven't figured out what the answer is. And that's churches that are used primarily on Saturday and Sunday. And then during the week, the building is empty. But you have to heat it, cool it, clean it, and so on. Another strategy is the circular economy. Typical product is from the supply chain. We're going to the supply loop. What do we mean by supply chain? You produce a product, you use it, and then you dispose of it. But basically what we need to do is use it over again and over again. Problem is 91% of our plastics are not recycled. And by 2050, the plastics in the ocean are going to outweigh the fish in the ocean unless we do something about it. And what we need to do is bring back the milkman. I'm sure many of you remember, I remember as a little kid when the milkman delivered a gallon bottle of milk to our front door. After we consumed it, we put the glass bottle back there, he'd pick it up, drop off a full one, take the empty one, they clean it out, reuse it again. And we need to do something like that. And there is a company, TerraCycle, started something called The Loop, where you can order online. UPS will deliver the products you want in small containers in a tote. And after you're through using the product, you put the empty bottles in a tote, UPS picks it up and takes it back. This is something that was started in 2019. In 2020, it came to the United States. It's in 48 states now. And some of the companies are P&G, Unilever, Nestle, Pepsi, Danone, Mondelez, total of 400 different products. And you can get the Loop in Kroger or Walgreens. Some other sustainability strategies is biomimicry. Nature, just stop to think how long nature has been on this earth. what we call nature, the birds, the animals, the plants, and so on. And they've all survived. They had food, waste. Hardly any waste was created. Waste wasn't created until humans came on the earth. But there's a lot that we can learn from nature. As an example, the abalone shellfish. This is what it looks like. This shell is basically discs of calcium carbonate with polymer holding them together. And this disc is stronger than any man-made ceramic. And the question is, how does the fish do it in the water with minerals? Everything's in the water. So how does the fish do it? Another is spider silk. The spiders, they mix the silk and glands, extruded through spinnerets, and they create a web or a line for repelling. And spider silk is 5 times stronger than steel on a per weight basis, and it's 40% elastic. We need to learn, how does a spider do it? Bivalves, what are bivalves? Like a mussel, oyster. Mussels, how do they grow? They attach themselves to a rock while they're growing. And in order to attach themselves, they have to create a glue. And they have 1 millimeter tethers where the glue comes out and attaches to the rock. Just saying, have you ever tried to glue anything that's wet? It's pretty hard. But how does a mussel glue underwater, create an adhesive, and it sticks? Something else that we need to learn. And cows' enzyme production. You've probably heard that ethanol gas, companies are making ethanol using corn. So they take the corn kernels, convert it to starch, to sugar, to a fuel, but only the corn kernels. The cow, however, can eat an entire corn stalk and produce sugar and energy. So how does a cow do it? Well, what they're doing now is taking an enzyme from the stomach of a cow and injecting it into corn seed to see if now, when using corn to make ethanol, we can use the entire stalk, not just the corn kernels. And talking about biomimicry, here's one of my favorites. What if you had to make a rigid structure using the least amount of material? In other words, you have to have minimum material, but you want to make it rigid. As an example, let's say you wanted to make an airplane wing and you cover it with the steel, but the structure, how do you do it? If you remember from geometry days, if you had a certain size perimeter, the largest area was a circle. So you try doing it, but you can see there's a lot of material close together, so that's not going to work. How about triangles? Well, where they meet at the vertex there, a lot of material. Next is a 4-sided figure. That's a little better, but we still need to find something that uses less material. 5-sided, a pentagon, that doesn't work. How about a hexagon? That's the best. Engineers figured this out. Well, they didn't have to have an engineering department. All they had to do is look at how the beehives are made. Bees have been doing this for thousands of years. They figured out what kind of structure they need to make a strong structure with the minimum amount of material. Another strategy is base of the pyramid. Base of the pyramid is a business concept developed at the University of Michigan by C.J. Prahalad. And basically, he looks at the world and says, at the bottom of the pyramid, we have about 4.2 billion people making less than $1,500 a year. And then in the middle, we have 1.7 billion making 1,500 to 15,000. And at the top, you have the wealthy people. So if you're a manufacturer and you're producing product, where do you want to sell it? To the people at the top, because they have the money. But Mr. Prahalad, he's going to take a great leap downward. And he said, instead of selling to the top of the pyramid, we're going to sell to the base of the pyramid. I'll give you some examples. What is the most common form of transportation in the world other than walking? Bicycles. But bicycles, you can only go so far because you get tired. So their company decided that they're going to make a motor that you can add to a bicycle so you can go on for quite a while. And after they did that, they said, well, make a bigger motor and make motorcycles. So they started doing that. They're at the base of the pyramid, working their way up. And they said, well, maybe we'll make even a bigger motor and put it on a four-wheel vehicle, an automobile. What company was that? Honda. That's how Honda started, starting with motorbikes and motorcycles, and then automobiles. Another example is LEDs. Villages in developing countries, like in Africa, villages that had very little light. And one of the reasons they have very little electricity. So a light bulb was developed that does not use very much electricity. And that's the origin of the LED. Started at the base of the pyramid. Now everybody uses it. Why not? It uses very little electricity. Another company is Gaylance. Gaylance is a company in China that was making microwave ovens. And when they started out, they supplied 2% of the Chinese homes, very little. That was in 1993. By the year 2000, they had 76% of the Chinese market. And today they have 35% of the world market. So again, they started at the base of the pyramid and they worked their way up. Another strategy is eco-effective versus eco-efficient. We have a lot of eco-efficient possibilities, but are they eco-effective, like fuel efficiency? For automobiles, you can double the fuel efficiency, miles per gallon, which means you're using half as much. But if you have 4 times as many cars, you haven't really solved the problem. You're still using too much gas. So what we needed to do is go to capturing the carbon emissions or using renewable energy, computing efficiency. You may have heard of Moore's Law. Every 18 months, you double the efficiency of a computer. It goes twice as fast. So they sell you another computer. That's eco-efficient. Eco-effective would be, instead of selling you a new computer, just sell you a new chip. So you just put a new chip in your computer and it goes twice as fast. More durable brake pads. Brake pads on your cars. If you make them more durable, they'll last longer. So what happens when brake pads wear out? The material there ends up being a waste on the roads and on the sides of the roads. But what if you made brake pads out of a material that's compostable so that when you use it up and it goes into the soil there, it does some good. And the last of my corporate type sustainability strategies, like BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. In other words, thinking out of the box. Again, washing machines. use the washing machines, you use hot water, which means you have to heat up the water to use it. But companies came out with detergents where you could use cold water. Well, why don't we come up with something that like a pellet that exudes a vapor that can clean all your clothes and you don't use any water at all. Toilets. You ever stop to think that the water that it goes into your toilet tank is of the same quality as the water you drink? Does it have to be that clean? How about having toilets with sinks above the toilet tank? So after you're through using the toilet, you wash your hands and that wash water goes into the tank and you use it for the next flush. And it probably cleans your toilets better because you have some soapy water in there. If you don't like the looks of these, you can have something a little nicer. You can see the sink on the right and the water goes into the toilet tank. Or you can get your own cover and put it on top of your existing tank. This way, we're using the water twice. And something that I found really interesting is urinals. In men's public bathrooms, after you're through using the urinal, you wash your hands and that water flushes. You don't have to hit a lever to flush the urinal. This was designed by somebody in Lithuania. It's all over Europe. I contacted him to see if we can bring this to the US. He said it's illegal. I don't know why, but it's illegal. But it's great. Farming. The food that we eat from the origin to the table travels something like 1,500 to 1,800 miles. And what we need is basically vertical farms where you can grow inside a building. And what are the benefits? You get year-round production, no weather problems. All foods are grown organically. It eliminates agricultural runoff. Farming is in urban centers, and it reduces fossil fuel use. And water consumption is about 10% of what it is out in the agricultural field. Here's one in Newark, New Jersey. This is in a building that used to be an athletic stadium, some kind of stadium, and was shut down. So what else can we do? How about reducing carbon emissions to improve our climate? I'm going to talk about what each of us can do. I was talking about what corporations can do, but for each of us, we can switch to all lighting by LEDs, consider solar energy. There are a lot of benefits in Illinois for solar energy. And to give you an example, the church that I attend, Saints Peter and Paul Greek Orthodox Church at Lake and Wagner Road across from the Wagner Farm, we're installing a solar system on the community center of the church. And it should be in before the end of the year. And one of the reasons, and the main reason we're doing it, is there's so many incentives that it's not going to cost the church one penny. What you do is you form an LLC that takes advantage of all the benefits, and after 5 to 6 years, the LLC gets all their money back, transfer ownership to the church, and the church has free solar energy for the next 25 years. So here's an example of a house in Glenview, and you can see the solar panels on the different roofs. But if you don't like solar panels on top of your roof, you can have a house like this. You can't tell that those are, the roof is made of solar panels. So it really looks much nicer. And the other answer if you don't want to put solar panels on your roof, go with community solar. What is that? Well, an example is what I use. There's a company called Clearway. They have a solar farm in Winnebago County, and it's maybe 5,000 solar panels, a big farm. And I told them how much energy I use during the year, and they said 4.5 panels will supply you the energy for your house. So I subscribe and I pay Clearway for the use of those solar panels, and ComEd gives me credit, and the net effect is a 20% savings. And so saving money plus you're using carbon-free. Or something that I think is great, something that North Shore Senior Center can do. You create an account with UCapture, and basically the account becomes ucapture.com/NSSC. And what is this company? It's an online company that has a relationship with over 30,000 companies, online companies that sell products and services online. And once you sign up, you know, let's say the center here creates an account, and each of you individually have your own account there. Anytime you purchase anything online, that company will send UCapture a commission of anywhere from 1% to 20%. The average is around 3 to 4%. And UCapture takes that money and invests in projects around the world, reduce carbon. 67% of that commission goes to reducing carbon emissions. 28% goes to operating the company UCapture, and 5% will come back to the North Shore Senior Center. And it's very passive. Once you have an account, you never have to do anything. It happens automatically. So the other thing, you drive less or go EV, electric vehicles. And although there's a big push for electric vehicles, I personally don't recommend that we all get electric vehicles tomorrow. The infrastructure is not going to be able to handle it. I think we should go gradually. And what I would propose is for the automotive companies making gasoline internal engines, make them more efficient. There's no reason that they can't be more efficient. My first automobile was a 1961 Renault Dauphine. And so that was over 60 years ago, and I was getting 40 miles to the gallon. There's no reason why, with today's technology, we can have better gas automobiles. Another strategy, we have to move Earth Overshoot Day later. I said it's July 28th. We need to go into August and then hopefully September. So what do we need to do is minimize waste. Believe it or not, the developed countries like the US, we waste over 30% of our food. Why? People tend to purchase more than they need, and then it spoils and they have to throw it out. What's worse are grocery stores purchase more than they can sell because they don't want to be caught short of certain products. They want to make sure they fulfill the needs of their customers. So they buy more than they need, and they end up throwing out a lot. The developing countries waste over 30% too. Why? Because when they produce their food, their infrastructure is such they don't have the refrigeration or the trucking to get that product to the customer. So they waste 30%. And another way to do it is use vertical farming. What can we all do to preserve water? Here's something that I tell people that this is why I do it. And if they know why I do it, maybe they'll do it, although I get a lot of resistance. And that's don't drink bottled water. Why? First of all, tap water is cleaner. Tap water is regulated by the EPA, bottled water by the FDA. EPA standards are much more stringent than FDA. As an example, EPA tests the water 10 times a month, FDA maybe twice a month. E. coli, bottled water can have very tiny amount of E. coli in there and it'll pass. EPA cannot have any at all. And if the water and bottled water is sit there for some time, plasticizer from the plastic bottle can get into the water. It takes twice the volume of a bottled water just to make the plastic bottle. So if you're drinking 12-ounce bottled water, you're actually consuming 36 ounces because you needed 24 just to make the bottle. Tests have shown that tap water tastes better. And depending on whether you buy the bottled water at, say, a store like Costco or at a athletic field, a ballpark, you're going to pay anywhere from 300 to 3,000 times as much. We need more efficient toilets, dual flush toilets, or the toilet sink combination. And another one is don't water your lawn. And there's a reason that I haven't watered my lawn in I don't know how many years. And they're online. I'll leave this so you can read a little story. I'm going to take Q&A, and if we have time, I'll read what's on this. And some final points is the impact of COVID on the environment. Remember I told you the 4 major environmental issues? Well, when COVID hit, water use decreased, carbon emissions went way down, there was less travel. People in India, for the first time in 30 years, could see the top of a mountain. Earth overshoot day was 3 weeks later, and birth rate decreased. There was less dating, and people with young married couples are thinking twice about raising children in this terrible environment. And I look at it as a message from God. It says, I created this earth for you, and you've been destroying it. And I just showed you that you can still have a decent life without destroying the environment. And why are we not doing enough? I put people in 4 categories. People, I don't believe we have a problem, so they don't do anything. And then there are people who say, yeah, we have a problem, but the market forces will take care of it. Corporations will take care of it. I don't have to do anything. And then there are people who say, for me to help the environment, I have to change my lifestyle. I don't know if I really want to do it. And if I do it, what impact am I going to have on the rest of the world? So why bother? And the worst is this one. It's not going to affect me because I'm not going to be here. So why bother? So how do you respond to these deniers? I tell them, using climate change as an example, I tell them, let's all assume that climate change is for real, and let's all do something about it. And, buy energy efficient appliances, travel less, do everything to reduce emissions. And let's say 30 years from now, you find out you were wrong, that it wasn't real. What are the consequences? Well, you change your lifestyle a little, you spend a little more money, we develop new products. Let's take the other side. Let's assume climate change doesn't exist and we do nothing. And 30 years from now, we find out we were wrong. What are the consequences? Devastating, really bad. So take your choice. And just a couple comments. One is, we did not inherit the environment from our ancestors. We're borrowing it from our children. And Bill McKibben was a internationally known activist for climate change. He said that we, everybody in this room, we are going to be the first generation to leave this planet in worse shape than we found it. So think about that. Later is too late. And thank you for this opportunity, and I'll take questions.
Doctor, that was excellent presentation. We're going to take Q&A first from the audience, and then there are some from the Zoom.
Okay, Jane Goodall, when asked the same question, what could we do? What one thing do you recommend? And she said, eat less meat. Do you agree with that also?
Stay near the mic.
Yes, yes. One of the biggest emitters of carbon is the emissions from cattle and cows, or cattle, cows, pigs, and so on. Believe it or not, there is a study being made to treat the food that cattle eat in order to reduce the type of emissions that come out of a cow. So there's work on it, but it is a way, eating less meat.
Very interesting presentation. A lot to think about. You mentioned that 97% of the water in the earth is salt water. Some countries are finding a way to convert salt water to fresh water. Israel, for example. How do you feel about that tactic?
Oh yeah, it's very common in the Eastern Mediterranean. There's a lot of facilities where they convert salt water to fresh water. There are some facilities in California that are doing it. It's very expensive. Basically what they do is boil the water and leave the salt down, and then they condense it and have fresh water. So it's possible, but it is being done, but it's very expensive. But it might be something that we're going to have to end up doing because water is definitely a problem.
Lately, we've heard a lot of talk about the Amazon forest. Well, do you have any comment or about that?
Yes, what's happening, the emissions, carbon is being absorbed by trees, vegetation. And we need as many trees as possible. There are forests in southeast the US that are cut down, and they make a pelletized fuel that goes primarily to Europe that they use in place of coal. And somebody said, well, doesn't that emit carbon? It does, but they plant new trees to absorb as much carbon as those trees are giving off as a fuel. So what's happened in the Amazon forest, those trees that are being cut down, it's that much less that can absorb carbon from the atmosphere. So it is a problem. I really don't know to the extent, but that's the reason for it.
Do we need to worry less about water consumption here in Chicagoland because Lake Michigan is, right on our shores and we're getting our water that way? Or should we still be good stewards of water?
Well, here in the Midwest, we are really spoiled because the Great Lakes represents 20% of the available fresh water on the planet, yet it supplies water to only 0.5% of the population. So we have a lot of water. People ask the question, how about shipping it to California in pipes and so on? Technically, I don't know if it can happen. You have to put new pipes in, but there's also an agreement among all the Great Lakes that water cannot go so far away. But there is a problem, like Nestle, the biggest bottled water company in the world, built a bottled water plant in Michigan, and they're extracting water from the ground, from the wells. Well, they depleted all that water, underground water. So they went to Congress, and Congress said, oh, you can take it out of Lake Michigan. So Nestle is now taking water out of Lake Michigan, bottling it and shipping it to Asia. So we are helping other countries, but I think we need to set an example of saving water, even though we have plenty of it here.
My questions are, could our cities, villages, or communities do something to help us be encouraged to save our rainwater so we could water our lawns? Or could our communities give us some kind of incentive to use the motion detectors for turning on and off our lights where we are in our homes, so we might use less electricity in our homes? Oh, what would you say to our communities doing some kind of incentive
Well,
program to that?
I think those are both possible solutions, great solutions. But in order to have that happen, the villages or the government's going to have to provide some grants, some financial aid for the people to do it. But those are both excellent ideas. There's an organization in Vancouver, Canada, that has evaluated 60 countries in this world as to how well they're doing in fighting climate change. And they have a number of metrics. It's called the Climate Change Performance Index. And number one on the list, or number four, is Denmark. And they said nobody is 1, 2, or 3 because nobody deserves to be 1, 2, or 3. So Denmark is number 4. The US is something like 38 on the list, and China is maybe 25. It's the Climate Change Performance Index. So we're just not doing enough.
Last point,
And
Doctor.
And politics has a lot to do with it.
Yes, last point, and it's a request. Can we get a copy of your slides? Can you
Yes.
make that available to Jill, and Jill can
Yes.
send it to everybody that's on our list, and they can come see you later and get information from you. Also, a comment here about how can you speak at our senior center or retirement house? So someone will come to talk to you about that, but I'll thank you and I'll turn it back to Bob.
When I make presentations and I have slides, I always give them to the audience. And so you can have a copy, because chances are I copied them from somebody else.
Thank you, thank you.
I have a comment and a question of you. The comment, Ron, when you mentioned politics, take that S at the end of politics and put a vertical line through it. And that'll give you the answer there.
Wait, one more question.
Hi, George. Just to wrap this up, I've heard the presentation before, so I don't have any questions for you. And I just want to let everybody in the audience know that I've known George for 67 years. We graduated Austin High School together, and he's had an incredible, distinguished career. And thanks for coming.